happy to see everyone today. My name is Chris Anderson, for those of you who don't know me, and I work on marketing for Amazing Community. And I can say without a doubt that we are in for a treat having Wendy Battles here to share her story about the power of reinvention. Not only does Wendy work in cybersecurity for Yale University, she is also the founder and host of Reinvention Rebels, a podcast that celebrates women who are 50 and older. And in Wendy's words, they have found their voice and they are unapologetically pursuing their dream. And I think being unapologetic is a big part of what Wendy advocates for and celebrates, especially for women who are of a certain age. But anyways, the stories that she reveals in her podcast, I found to be informative, intimate, and inspiring. And I think you will too. I think through her podcast, she is changing the narrative about aging to be one of loss, which is sort of typically accepted these days, and turning it into one of possibilities. And I would say she is reinventing aging. So thank you so much, Wendy, for being here. And though we've spoken only once, after listening to your podcasts, I feel like I really know you, which is a delight. I'm so glad we're friends now. It's been a pleasure listening to your soothing voice and hearing these inspiring stories. And so now I would happily hand it over to you so that you can share your story about reinvention and some of the things you've learned along the way. So take it away.
Thank you. First of all, thank you everyone at Amazing Community. I am just excited and I am grateful to be here with all of you. I'm really excited to just talk about this idea of reinvention and the notion that I believe that any of us, wherever we are in the age spectrum, and I know I focus on women over 50, but I think that any of us can reinvent ourselves at any age or any stage. And I feel like a lot of what we're going to talk about today is our mindset. Like, I feel like this idea of, what is a reinvention rebel? Someone who is going after her dreams in this unapologetic way. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But I thought what I could do is just begin by telling you a little story first about how I reinvented myself. And I have a guess, and maybe for those of you that are on camera, we can just have a show of hands. How many of you would say that you have reinvented yourself at some point in your life? Anybody? I think like all of us. And would any of you say that you've reinvented yourself multiple times over the course of your life? I totally have, because I will tell you as a little backstory. Even when I was in college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I spent a good chunk of my life, I'm 56 now, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. So I changed my major 8 times in college because I really had no clue. I basically settled on sociology and anthropology because they said, listen, you have to make a decision. You can't keep changing. You have to stick to something. So I chose that, but then I graduated and I'm like, what do you do with a sociology degree? So I've done a lot of different things in my career. I've reinvented myself many times, but I think the common theme that I always felt was that I was good at a lot of things, but I never felt like I was living on purpose. So I had many jobs. I worked in the nonprofit world. I worked in a corporation, and I'm not a corporate person. I started doing voiceovers in the 90s as a voice actor and dabbled in that. I tried my hand at stand-up comedy, of course, not as a career, but just for fun. And it's really hard, much harder than it seems. I guess it already seems hard, but it's really, really hard. But I never really felt like I had a thing. Some people, you probably can think of people that come to mind. They shine at something. There's something that they're so great at, and they've known since they were 6 or 12 or 25 that this is what I'm meant to do. So I basically spent most of my life trying to figure out, what is that thing? What is it that I'm really meant to do? And I will tell you that it took me until 54, even though I reinvented myself many times, it took me until 54 to really feel like I was starting to live on purpose. That doing something that lights me up, that is what I'm meant to do, that I would get up and do it for free, which is pretty much what I'm doing anyway, but I would definitely do that thing and not think twice about it. So, just a little story about how I got to Reinvention Rebels. And I want to just share a little bit about what I think makes for a compelling Reinvention Rebel and share a few of the stories and then just have some discussion about this idea of reinvention and how it applies to really all of us. But it all started in the fall of 2019. And I'll tell you that I love podcasts. I've been listening to podcasts for several years. I've heard lots of different ones and all different types of topics that I like. And I used to think I could never be a podcast host, even though I really like talking a lot. And, I'm just enamored with this idea of information and sharing information and doing it in really creative ways. Anyway, in the fall of 2019, I was asked to be on a panel at Yale that was organized by our Future Leaders of Yale affinity group. And it was about personal branding. Wendy, can you join us on this panel with some other people from the university to talk about personal branding and how young people can really work on branding themselves to build their careers at Yale? Sure, I said, I'll do that. And then I thought, Wendy, what do you really know about personal branding? And so I'd had a business before. I was a health coach several years before. So I'd certainly done some of that work, but it had been a long time. So I started listening to some podcasts about branding. And one of the podcasts I came across was called Package Your Genius. Package Your Genius. It was this woman, I can't remember her name now, but Amanda Miller Littlejohn. So she's got this great podcast. And the essence of the podcast is to help people figure out what they shine at. Her premise is that there is something that each of us shines at, that other people might be able to do it, but they can't do it necessarily the way that Victoria or Chris or Stellar or Naomi can do it, right? So you have your own personal stamp. There's something that you do that you are so good at. So I heard this idea and I ordered her book and I started reading the book called Package Your Genius because I love this idea. And I started asking myself all these questions that were in her book. What are you good at? What do you love to do? What energizes you? What are the things you don't like to do? What, if you could do anything, what would it be? And I was asking myself these questions and just spending a lot of time being really quiet and doing a lot of things in silence, like doing the dishes in silence, cooking in silence. Ideas started to come to me. And one day when I was meditating, after I'd, done this presentation, I, all I heard were these two words, reinvention rebels. Reinvention what? Reinvention rebels. I had no idea what that meant. I just thought when I get ideas like that though, or like my inner wisdom bubbling up, I try to write it down. That's what I've learned. Usually it never steers me wrong. So I just wrote that down and I noodled on it. And over time, over the next few months, it became clear to me that it was a podcast. And so I don't know anything about podcasting other than I like to listen to them. So like, how do you even start something like that? But I just started to really tune into, I love the idea of empowering women. And when I was doing my health coaching practice, it was working with women. So I've always had this idea that I like to see women shine and be at their best. I also thought, well, I'm 54 and I have reinvented myself many times. So what about this idea of reinvention and what's possible? So I really got on this idea very organically about about the idea that if I could talk to women that have already done this and are living their best life, whatever that means for them, that it could be a way to inspire other women about what's possible. Because I believe that we can manifest anything we choose if we have that intention and if we believe it's possible. And I believe that stories are a powerful way to help people see what's possible. And we often can see a part of ourselves in other people's stories, even if they're completely different, even if they've had a totally different experience than I've had. I feel like we can still gain something from that or see a little part of ourselves in that. So that really intrigued me. So I literally just took this idea of, what is a reinvention rebel and kind of worked on it, and I got this idea, well, it's someone who's really finding that voice. And we all find our voice at different times and it manifests in different ways. And I don't think finding our voice means we're the loudest, it has to mean we're the loudest voice in the room or we're overpowering other people. I think it just means we're speaking our truth, whatever that means for us individually. And for me, I just really realized I've always done a lot of public speaking. I really enjoy public speaking. I, wanted to use my voice in a really positive way. We're certainly living through really difficult times and chaotic times. And I thought, well, I want to do something that adds value. How can I use my voice in a way that can add value for other people? And I love the idea of inspiring people. So those were some of the pieces that were sort of floating around that over time started to pull together and figured out, well, what if I interview these women? What if I start with my friends? Because I know all kinds of inspirational people. And I certainly had this idea of shining the light on. I thought, I figured 50. Well, I'm already over 50, so I should start in that age range. But I also thought, I know that there are people that are a lot older than me, that are in their 60s and 70s and 80s, that I would consider reinvention rebels. So I didn't want to limit the age. I didn't want to make it too young, but I wanted to really be focused on what I feel like are that age range when we tend to be ignored, where there is less focus on us, where the expectations about older women, they really change. It's like you go through menopause, as you said, you go through a lot of loss. That's often the focus. We're losing our beauty, our bodies are changing. It's to me a narrative that I don't find to be particularly positive because I think those changes can be good. I mean, going through menopause is not the worst thing in the world. I mean, sure, the hot flashes aren't so great, and I really don't like that part. But you know, I also see it as this place of possibility. So that just got me really intrigued. This whole idea got me really intrigued, and then I, I didn't know anything about podcasting, how to do it. So it's interesting how though when you have an intention about something, whatever that is, how the universe I feel like opens up to support you. So I found this training through this woman who has a podcast that I love called Side Hustle Pro. So her podcast is about how she interviews Black women who have turned their side hustle into a profitable business. And I really loved her podcast. So she started teaching. Oh my gosh, my phone. I'm sorry. She started teaching um, she started teaching this. I'm sorry, my mom is calling me. I'm sorry to be distracted by that. But she started teaching this class, this online class about podcasting, how to start your own podcast, which I thought looked like really interesting. So I signed up for the course, and that's how I figured out how to actually do it, which is everything from the tech part of it to the editing part of it. So that was really helpful. And then I was mentioning to someone I know at work who I was on a committee with that I had this idea, and he said, "Oh, I would love to help you. I do editing. I'm an editor because one thing I'm not good at is editing. I do voiceover work, and you have to do a lot of your own work now in this, self-help world, and I'm terrible at it. So that's not my strength, and I find it horribly tedious. So I knew I didn't like that. But so he just said, "Oh, I'll help you," and he started. So he just started editing the podcast for me, just like that. And I said, well, how much do you charge? And he said, well, I don't want to charge you. I believe in this mission so, so deeply that I just want to help you. So just that's what I mean about when you just kind of decide you want to do something and you put it out there. It's funny how things just kind of come around to support you in doing that. So that's just a little background on what inspired me, how I first got started, how things, all these things just kind of showed up to this little network of people showed up to support me. I started asking my friends, would you be a guest on the podcast? And, they said yes. And that's how I kind of cut my teeth on it. And what I think is really interesting about this, especially, is that sometimes we do things and things don't, in our career or in our personal life, they don't work out. And I know that it's easy for me to feel very disappointed when something doesn't work out because I have this idea of this is how it should work. And when it doesn't work that way, it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Why isn't it working out? And you can feel disappointed or upset. But one of the things I've definitely learned is that all those things that we do in our life, all those experiences we have are often, if we're open to it, preparing us for something else. The failures, the successes, and everything else in between. And one of the things I feel like with reinvention and for myself personally, that all these things that I did have really prepared me to do this. So all the time I spent learning about voiceovers and doing voiceovers in the past, and the times when I did it, when I gave up because it was hard and I didn't think I could do it. But I got this training, and so I know how to use my voice in a certain way, and that has really helped me with the podcast. There's other things I've done where, all the public speaking that I do and entering in speech competitions that's helped me. All the times I've interviewed people over the years, like when I was a health coach, I would go on our local ABC affiliate on a local morning show, and I do these little segments on healthy eating. So all that again is just preparing me, even though that wasn't really the destination at the time. I feel like that was just a stop on that journey. It was like a pit stop or the rest stop, right? Where I gained more knowledge about how do you work with someone in the moment? How do you work with producers? How do you work with whatever whoever the on air talent is and be guided by them? How do you learn how to listen deeply and be able to respond? And so I feel like all of those things really have helped me get to where I am today. And I'm imagining that many of you would say the same thing. If you kind of step back and look at your life, whether it's professionally or personally, we've had our stumbles, we've had our victories, we've had things that sometimes we didn't know it was maybe information that was going to help us in the future. We had, a lot of lessons learned, and sometimes it felt like it was the hard way, but I do feel like, wow, these many of these things have helped me to just kind of be in this place where I'm so open to the possibilities instead of, I think in the past I've really tried to control things. Well, if this happens and this happens, then X will happen. If A, B, and C happen, then D will happen. And I had a very prescribed way of what I expected and I wanted to happen. And if it didn't happen that way, I was very disappointed. And I see that the Racy is saying living on purpose and trusting the process, and that is so true. And I feel like one of the reasons why it's working out so well for me is this idea of surrender. You have to really be able to surrender and have that faith that it's all working out, but that sometimes the path isn't exactly the way we prescribe, and that there are many other ways to get to the same place, so that we don't have to be so controlling about, I want it only to happen the way I want it to happen. And so that's one of the really important lessons I've learned through this experience of podcasting, is that, huh, if I'm open to the possibilities, so many doors open up. One thing leads to the next. I put myself out there, and then someone says, oh, can you come now be a guest on this podcast or on this show that I'm doing? Or can you write this article for me? And those are, again, all ways really to do what I think is living in my mission of trying to inspire midlife and older women about what's possible, because that's ultimately what this is about, is showing people there is a different path. One is this really interesting narrative that, not, maybe it's not interesting, this narrative about what we can't do, but what if we change that? And it didn't have to be the way society says it is. What if we looked at the alternatives and we could have a little window into, well, if so and so is doing that, then maybe I could do my own version of that, whatever that is. It might not be someone else's path, but it's my own version of that. So by shining the light on other people, we can open up and see perhaps new possibilities for ourselves. So I'll just stop there for a moment and see if there are questions or thoughts you have.
I just am wondering, like sometimes if you have an idea, you self sabotage, you say, I can't do it, or you say no to yourself. And I wonder whether you saying no to yourself is a sign you shouldn't do it because you're not passionate enough about it, or it's just a sign that you're not confident enough to do it. Like, how do you straddle that? How do you figure out what your no it actually means?
Mm, that's such a good question, Chris. That's a really good question. And I imagine it's probably different for all of us. I don't know if I always know what my no is, but one thing I will say, I'll say a couple things. One is that I've been able to get to know myself a lot better. And I think for me, by being more quiet, by tuning in, because I tend to be a very busy person that runs around a lot. And one of the benefits of the pandemic has been the opportunity to be more grounded and to slow down. And it's let me tune into myself more. Even though I already had the idea for the podcast before the pandemic started, but I think it's enabled me to tune into what's important to me, what feels good, what feels right. And I because I feel like almost all of this about reinvention, like the crux of it is getting to know yourself better, is being open to self-inquiry, to have more self-awareness and self-understanding. Like I feel like those are really important parts of reinventing ourselves. It's not just like, well, I want to be X. Well, why do you want to be X? Why do you want to do that? What is it you're curious about? What lights you up? And I think for me, a lot of it was about the yes. Like, what is it that feels good and feels right? I do also think that those no's, that sometimes if we're really listening to ourselves and we get to know ourselves better, we can also tune into more of those no's. What doesn't feel right. But I also believe that, how people, sometimes you ask people's opinions, or, people will give you unsolicited advice, whether it's your family or a colleague or a friend. People will tell you, we all have those people in our lives that are like, well, really? You're going to do that? Or like, why do you think that's a good idea? Or, and it's not that I think they want to steer us in the wrong direction. I think maybe sometimes it's their own uncertainty or their own self-doubt that sometimes can be projected onto us. And I think one of the things I think about that's important about reinvention, though, is figuring out, like, I don't care what anyone else thinks. It's getting to that point where that's the unapologetic part. Yes, so and so might say that, or my family might say that, or my spouse, my friend, who fill in the blank. And maybe that's more about them, what's going on for them. But what is it that's important to me? Because I think that's what this is really about. We have spent so much time, and I don't have children, and I know people that do, helping their kids be their best, often at the expense of our own self care. And even we don't have kids, right? We often are so busy helping others or doing other things that we don't take care of ourselves. But I think so much of this is, well, what does Chris want? What does Ashley want? What does Victoria want? What is it what's important to me? What lights me up? It's such an opportunity to shine the light on ourselves in a way that we often haven't given ourselves permission to do. And one of my guests, Natalie, who was on several episodes ago, is this really amazing woman who lives in Cleveland, who at 60, she retired at 59. She traveled all around the world by herself at 60, 7 countries with one carry-on bag, which I thought was really extraordinary. And then decided at 61 she was going to do this internship. She likes bourbon. So she decided to pitch this idea of a bourbon internship at 61. So she's doing this internship at this bourbon factory in Cleveland. And we talked a lot about this idea of permission. How do I give myself permission? And I really believe at the end of the day that reinventing ourselves is about self permission. It's about saying it's okay for me to want, or to want something bigger or something different, maybe something totally different than what I'm even doing now. It's okay to think differently about my life. All of that is okay. And I feel like if we can allow ourselves that space to grow and thrive and be curious, it makes it so much more possible to reinvent ourselves in maybe bigger ways than we imagine. Because I also think that women tend to play small. If I just get a little, it's okay, because a little is better than nothing. But why can't we have a lot? Why can't we have it? Why can't our dream be huge? Why can't we shatter whatever that limiting thought is we might have and just go for it? And I feel like this is a great time for us to do that. You get into your 50s and there's a lot of new possibilities, because if you have kids, often your kids are, maybe they're on their own, or you're going to become an empty nester soon. And I just think that there's so much possibility and just thinking so much bigger than we often do, and giving ourselves a lot more credit than we often do. Like, why shouldn't we give ourselves more credit? Why shouldn't we appreciate our accomplishments? Men do it all the time. They do it constantly. It's just what they do. They don't think twice about it. They just do it. I did a great job yesterday. We're like, well, my job, I did an okay job. It was all right, but I could have done better. We often go right to self criticism instead of like appreciating that, even if it's not perfect. A lot of things I do aren't perfect, but a lot of things I do are pretty good or they're great. So why not start with that and then say, and I can also get better, of course, right? There's always continuous improvement. But I think that that's, just a really important factor is that idea of permission. It's okay for me to do these things. Um, and just beginning to feel absolutely, we need to totally celebrate more, and even the little baby steps that celebrating the done instead of constant. Yeah, yes, totally. Like, what have I done? What have I accomplished? Instead of the I haven't done enough, because we pressure ourselves so much. I think we should be superstars. We should do everything, and then we berate ourselves because we didn't do enough when we're already doing so much. So is it really realistic to, like, and I do that myself. I mean, I still do that and I'm trying to get better at it. You know how it is, work in progress. We're all a work in progress. And I think we can all celebrate ourselves some more. I do want to just mention this quickly and then just really open it up. I want to stop talking. But because I know people are commenting and I want everyone to maybe join the conversation. But I want to say these three things that I think are really important, three qualities that I think are important in these women I've interviewed, and I've begun to see these themes. What I call my three C's, curiosity, courage, and commitment. Curiosity, courage, and commitment. Reinvention Rebels are curious women. They are curious about themselves, about the world around them, about trying new things. They are willing to take some chances. And I think that part of reinvention is that idea that, how it is, not everything works out. We try things and sometimes they don't work, and that's okay, because maybe that's what we need to do en route to figuring out what that bigger thing is, or the way we want to reinvent ourselves. And the answers aren't always clear, and sometimes it is definitely that journey. So reinvention rebels are curious. They have courage, and courage manifests in so many different ways. Courage isn't necessarily, again, I'm the loudest person in the room, or I'm always talking boldly. It can be very subtle. And I talked in the last episode of the podcast about this idea of courage by choice. There's like rise to the occasion courage, when you just have to do it. Something happens and you don't even think about it, you just kind of get into action, which we do. But then there's this idea of courage by choice, that we have a muscle, this courage muscle that we can build like any other muscle, but we have to exercise it, right? It doesn't just happen like that overnight. We have to work at it. So but these women are very courageous, and in many different, like going around the world by yourself at 60, to me, that takes a lot of courage. Not everybody's, and that's not everybody's goal, but I think we can take that idea and say, well, what does courage look like for me? When I'm being courageous, how do I feel? What's a great example of someone I believe is very courageous? So we can again ask ourselves questions about that. And then that final one is commitment. That I have to have my, I have to be into this. If I want to reinvent myself, you don't reinvent yourself by saying, oh, I want to do X, but then not doing anything about it. Right. So you sometimes have to take that courage and turn that into action, even if it's just little baby steps in the direction. Maybe it's baby steps to try something out. And that I'll just say that I'm one that gives up. In the past, I've given up a lot on things. Well, that's not working out because I wanted to be easy. I wanted to work out just like that, and just beautifully, and that's just not how life is often. And so I feel like I've gotten that I've really had to work on that commitment, not giving up, knowing that you have to be persistent, that things don't always just fall in our laps. I mean, some things do, but other things we really have to work at. And I just think that, we got to just keep at it. and keep doing it. And so I think that's where the commitment part comes in. When I look at all these women that have reinvented themselves, they have kept at it. They've overcome obstacles to just keep going and sort of made it happen. So I think all those different things are really important. I like that scenic route.
When you were talking, Wendy, about the woman who traveled and took, was she the one that had the bourbon internship?
Yes.
So one of the things that she said during that interview, I believe, is like before the night before she was going to take her flight to head over, she was sobbing. She was so scared, and I just thought that's like good to hear, because you just think like there are certain people that are like always like exceeding expectations and doing that thing, and you have this feeling they're doing it without emotion behind. They're just that type of person,
Yeah.
and you're not. But you realize, no, we're all scared. We're all scared to try new things. This week, and this is not that brave. This is not brave at all, but I signed up for a dance class that was choreography, and I'm terrible at choreography. And I'm in the back of the class, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so bad. But you just like, if I could have had the option, I think I would have left. But I was like, no, you have to stay. You have to finish it. And I think knowing that other people are scared too or uncomfortable makes it easier to try new things. You know you're not alone in that journey. So
Exactly, exactly. And I'll just say, Chris, I think that's really brave. You said that that's not brave, but I disagree. I think that's really brave. I think anything that causes us to feel uncomfortable is something that requires bravery. And it doesn't matter what it is, because it's different for each of us. But to me, that's very brave to do, especially to do something we think we're not good at, where we feel like maybe I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing. Like,
I can it.
yeah. So I
Going
think
this
that's
way and
brave.
everyone's going that way.
Yeah. And I'm the same way, because I'm not good at like organized dances like that. Like and it's not that I have two left feet. I'm just not that, some people have that natural rhythm, and I have good rhythm, but not in that choreographed way.
Right.
If that makes sense. So I
Yes.
totally know what you mean. I totally know what you mean. And my motto is, when in doubt, cry it out. I think that like crying is one of the best things, when I sometimes, when I know people see it as like a sign of weakness or whatever, but I just feel like crying is a great emotional reset. That, because like what I do is I like, Stephanie's like, yes, totally. It's like, I feel like I hold everything inside. I get all upset, and then, but if I allow myself the space to just cry, it's kind of like, it's such a great reset that I then can just feel like, okay, now I can do it, which is really what Nally was saying, right? She was like, I can't do it, and now I can do it. Yeah. Sometimes we just need to have a meltdown to like remind ourselves, and I'm totally good with that.
I don't know. Does anybody have a story of a reinvention that either went well or went awry and they had to pivot? Or I was going to say, like, one of the stories too that I listened to. By the way, I highly recommend all of the episodes. They're all really inspiring and get you thinking about what you want to do on your journey. Um, but was Wendy Knox, and he
Yes.
had the analogy
Oh,
of the dragonfly that I didn't realize how dragonflies developed in the muck for 4 years. Is that right? So you just like, whenever I've seen a dragonfly,
something
I
like
just
some long
assume,
time. Yeah.
yeah, I assume they've just been flying around their entire lives, however long and short they are. And it turns out they're like in the mud, developing, shedding skin, doing all that stuff so that they can fly. And I just thought that was like a perfect way of thinking about us. Like sometimes we're in the muck, and just preparing ourselves to fly. So it just was really powerful episode.
Yeah. 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 I thought that was really, really great. And, it's so interesting because people's stories are so different, and their reinventions are so different. There are different things that inspire them. But all of them are compelling in so many different ways, that what they're up to, what they're thinking about, what they want to do with their lives, that I just, it makes me think that if they can do those things, like what can't we do? I think that sometimes our mindset can be one of limits. Well, I don't know if I can do that because of X. Or, if I did that, it would mean, why? Instead of what can't I do? Like why and why not? Like, why don't we ask ourselves more often, why not? Why not do that? Why not at least try? What's the worst thing that can happen if it doesn't work out? I've certainly learned something along the way, right? Because I feel like there's a lesson in everything. There's a lesson in everything. And so I'm just trying to shift my mind to being more open about my own possibilities as I age. And I was really inspired recently by Arlene, who wrote her first book at 62. And she had been a court reporter and she had carpal tunnel, so she had to retire early, and that was unexpected. She hadn't imagined that. But she realized in going through that, she started to kind of look around when she was done working and thinking, well, I really like writing and I love to read. And she realized she'd gotten all these books over the years where she'd written notes in them, and she just got really, sometimes we stop ourselves, we were like, well, I don't know how, or I'm not sure, it should I invest in myself enough to get some knowledge so I can do this thing that seems interesting? Because again, sometimes it's like, well, our self-doubt comes in, or we don't think we're worth it. But she just took a course at the local community college on writing. Not like she went to some 4-year program on writing and spent like thousands and thousands of dollars. She just started simply. She started a writers group. She started writing, and she got up every day and started writing like at 5:30 in the morning. And I just thought it was interesting though how things can manifest. You just, if you again kind of back, have a moment to kind of look into, what do I love to do? What inspires me? What's really interesting? And that's how she kind of got tuned in. And I know people often try to write books. And I just thought it was fascinating how she's really launched this whole new reinvention, and she's so excited about it. And it just was so inspiring to me. I'm like, well, if she can do that, like, what can't we do? Like, what can't any of us on this call today do if we decide we want to do it?
I find as I've gotten older, my bar for failure changes. Like I just say, well, nobody is going to die. Like that. That's how I tell myself to do it. No one's going to die. Everything's going to be fine. Like that's the litmus test.
Exactly.
Will I kill anyone?
Yes.
No. So I'm wondering, Wendy, as you've started this business, do you have any advice for us in terms of things to do to make it a business? Like, how did you expand your network? What sort of things did you do right away to reach out and get an audience? And I'm sure there's some tactical things that you've done.
That's a great question. Well, I've done a lot of networking, and of course, it all sort of happened during the pandemic. So clearly, not networking in person. But I started to think about, like, what are the organizations where I would find older women, midlife women, older women. And I was already on, amazing.community. Somehow I had connected with amazing.community and gone to like a talk a while ago, like a couple years ago. So it was so weird that one day I saw this email from Ashley and I just responded. And I just wrote back. I said, well, I started a podcast. And I mean, that's how we got this conversation started. And all I was doing was just kind of responding, like, well, I've been doing these cool things. Let me just tell somebody what they are, not even knowing it would lead to all of this. So I think part of it is putting ourselves out there, like figuring out who are the people that it would make sense for me to naturally connect with. And because I think one thing leads to the next as you start doing that. So I think that was certainly one thing I did. The second thing was really increasing my presence on social media. And I know that sometimes people have a negative connotation and all the downsides of social media, et cetera. But like anything, there's a way that you can make it work for you if you really want to do it. I mean, I'm just, and I think that I started to really figure out, well, where would I find my community of like-minded women on social media? And a lot of those people for me are on Instagram because it's easy to have conversations. and build community in a way that's different than Facebook, and that's different than many different ways, because I've got like all to kind of build community and to kind of get my message out there, and I've figured out how to really make that work on Instagram and continue to build. But then it's something different on Twitter. Like I'm also on Twitter, and again, I don't spend a lot of time on there. I write posts and I schedule things in advance. But on Twitter, I found there's a community of podcasters, and there's a lot of independent people that are podcasting, and so I found like people started writing me reviews that just found my podcast because I'm on there. And so now I found this whole community of other podcasters as a way to kind of build my knowledge and build my skills. And and so what I realized too is that it's really, I don't have a lot of time to listen to other people's podcasts anymore because I'm too busy making my own. But there's so much value in putting aside a time to do that, to discover new people, especially a lot of small independent podcasters. There's so much great content out there, to be able to review each other's podcasts, because that really makes a difference when you get reviews, to be found more easily, like in searches. And so it's so nice to also be able to not just ask for people to do it for me, but to be able to do it for other people. So this whole idea, I think, of being of service, like for me, I think one of probably the single most important part of doing this whole thing with reinvention and the podcast, is it is such an amazing way for me to be of service to other people, and to be able to use my skills and my talents for good, to be able to inspire other people. And that's probably the single most important thing that I get from this, is to be of service to others. And I haven't even figured out yet how do you monetize this, and how can you, like, I'm just like, I enjoy doing it so much that I would just do it anyway. So over time, maybe I'll figure out how to do that. I know some people use their podcast like for coaching, and I don't really want to be a coach. I've coached before, and that's not my thing. I mean, I love coaching, but that's not really what I want to do. I really want to just be able to use my voice in this way that reaches like millions of people, to inspire them. I think that's really my mission. But it certainly has led to all kinds of other things, and helped me start thinking about, okay, well, how can I make this a little more formal? Who are the other people I need to talk to? I started thinking about like my alumni associations, being able to put something in class notes. Like, how do you increase your audience? There's so many different ways to do that. So I have like all these ways I've thought about where I can connect with people. And it's not always like the connection you think with, like, women. I mean, that's certainly part of it. But because part of what I realized is lots of different people listen that aren't just all women, number one. There are like a bunch of my colleagues, I work in information security. There's a lot of men. There's a lot of men listening to my podcast, not nearly as many as women, I'm sure, but they started listening because I think the thing is that the themes are really universal. Even if you're not like a 50 to 90-year-old woman, you can get some inspiration from it, because I have a lot of younger women listening too. And this 35-year-old woman left me a review recently and said, well, I came across this, and I'm 35, and I wasn't sure I'd find something for me. And she said, and I just loved it. So I'm learning a lot, and kind of honestly, Chris, I'm figuring out as I go. I'm really figuring it out as I go. I haven't had all the answers, but now I'm like, oh, okay.
And we certainly
So,
appreciate it and encourage you to keep doing it for us. We are inspired, and
why, thank you.
I think we're running out of time, unfortunately. But thank you so much for taking the time to share your story. And as I said
Oh,
before,
sure.
I encourage everyone to get on Spotify, or as they say, wherever you listen to your podcast,
Right?
and sign up for Reinvention Rebels. Leave a review. Also follow Wendy on Instagram, and sign up for her newsletter. You will be happy that you did that. And as you can see, if you get a chance, we'd love your feedback. We'd love to know what we can do to make this an even better experience for you. And we have an upcoming, who we are. We are a community of women 45 and older who are navigating this digital world in work together, and together is sort of the operative word. We find that that's the only way we're going to get where we need to be, where we want to be in the world. So we look forward to seeing all of you again. Um, And we have one more event in July, and it's next Friday at 12 o'clock. This Journey to Unforgettable Experiences, which will be amazing. It's a woman from the UK who has founded this nonprofit, Unforgettable Experiences, where she's created this creative program for older people suffering from dementia or other neurological conditions and their carers. It's really a magical nonprofit. I think you'll enjoy hearing her story as well. Please sign up for our newsletter, support us, and we look forward to continuing our relationship with all of you. So thank you so much for spending the time. And Wendy, we love you. Look forward to hearing your voice
Oh,
continually. So yeah,
guys.
see you all
Thank
again.
you. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
Thank
everyone. Thank you
you.
for joining
Thank you
us.
so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.